Have you ever walked into a room where the music is loud, the champagne is flowing, and everyone is laughing, but you get a sudden cold knot in your stomach? That primal instinct that tells you something is wrong? That the floorboards are about to give way? Most people ignore that feeling. They keep dancing until the floor actually breaks. But there is one man in Omaha, Nebraska, who doesn't ignore it. He doesn't dance. He quietly puts down his glass, picks up his coat, and leaves before the screaming starts. For 14 years, the Oracle of Omaha held on to the Chinese electric vehicle giant like it was the crown jewel of Asia. He bought it when no one believed in it. He held it through the skepticism. But now, as the world screams that the future is electric, as headlines scream about China taking over the world, Buffett is selling. Not just a little. He is unloading billions of dollars worth of stock, systematically, week after week. His stake has dropped below the critical 5% reporting threshold. He is cashing out. Why? Because he sees what the glossy brochures and the paid tech influencers won't tell you. He sees the rust forming under the fresh paint. The Chinese EV industry isn't taking over the world. It is eating itself alive. We are witnessing the beginning of a collapse so massive it resembles the American railway bust of the 1800s or the dot-com crash of 2000, but on a scale that only China can produce. The narrative you've been sold is a lie. The narrative is growth. The reality is exhaustion. Today, we are going to look at the numbers that Beijing is trying to hide. We are going to look at the EV graveyards, fields the size of small cities filled with brand new cars that have never been driven, rotting into the earth. We are going to talk about the mass layoffs that have already begun, sweeping through the industry like a scythe. And we are going to ask the uncomfortable question: if the smartest investor in history is running for the exit, why are you still buying the hype? This is the story of the great EV implosion. Part 1. The signal in the noise. Let's go back to 2008. It was the height of the financial crisis. While the American housing market was burning down, Warren Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger, convinced him to invest $230 million into a practically unknown Chinese battery company called BYD. Munger called the CEO, Wang Chuanfu, a combination of Thomas Edison and Jack Welch. It was a legendary bet. That investment grew by over 3,000%. It was one of the greatest trades in history. So when the man who held the stock for 14 years starts dumping it right when BYD is supposedly beating Tesla, you have to stop and listen. The media will tell you it's just profit-taking. They say, oh, he's just rebalancing his portfolio. That is nonsense. You don't sell the winner if you think the game is still going. You sell the winner when you know the casino is about to close. Buffett looks at financials, not dreams. And the financials of the Chinese EV sector are currently a horror show masked by subsidies. The industry is suffering from a terminal disease called overcapacity. China has the capacity to build about 40 million cars a year, but the domestic market, the Chinese people, can only buy about 20 to 25 million. Do the math. That is a surplus of 15 million cars every single year. That is more than the entire car market of the United States, sitting in parking lots, waiting for buyers that do not exist. For years, the plan was simple. We will export them. If the Chinese won't buy them, the Americans and the Europeans will. But in 2024, that door slammed shut. The Biden administration slapped a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. The European Union has launched anti-subsidy investigations and is raising its own tariff walls. The escape hatch has been welded shut. And now, all those millions of cars are trapped inside China, circling the drain, fighting a gladiatorial death match for a shrinking pool of customers. Buffett sees this. He knows that when you have 100 companies fighting for the same bone, 95 of them will starve. and even the winner will emerge bleeding and broken. In 2024, the price war in China stopped being a competition and became a massacre. BYD started it. They launched the Glory edition of their cars with a slogan that terrified every other CEO in the country: electricity is cheaper than oil. They slashed prices by 10%, then 20%. You can now buy a BYD plug-in hybrid in China for less than $10,000 US. Think about that. A brand new car for less than the price of a used 2015 Honda Civic. On the surface, this looks like a triumph of manufacturing. But dig deeper. At that price, margins are razor thin. For everyone else, margins are negative. BYD can survive this because they make their own batteries and they have massive scale. But for the smaller players, XPeng, NIO, Leap Motor, this is a death sentence. We are seeing a phenomenon known as involution, or neizhuan. It's a term popular in China right now. It describes a process where everyone works harder and harder just to stay in the same place. The car companies are cutting features, squeezing suppliers, and firing workers just to match BYD's prices. Suppliers are being paid in IOUs. There are reports from the manufacturing hubs in the Pearl River Delta that parts manufacturers are going months without payment from EV startups. It's a Ponzi scheme of debt. The car maker pays the supplier when they sell the car, but they can't sell the car, so the supplier doesn't get paid. So the supplier fires their workers. The contagion is spreading upward, and the cracks are showing in the titans. Look at Hi-Fi. Just a year ago, Hi-Fi was the darling of the luxury EV world. Their cars looked like spaceships. They had doors that opened upwards, programmable headlights, 5G connectivity. They were selling cars for $80,000, targeting the Porsche crowd. In February 2024, right after the Chinese New Year, Hi-Fi suddenly announced a 6-month production halt. They locked the factory gates. Employees were told their salaries would be cut to minimum wage, basic subsistence levels. It was a lightning-fast collapse. One day they were the future. The next day, the showrooms were empty. Why? Because they ran out of cash. In a price war, luxury is the first thing to die. When BYD is selling adequate transportation for $10,000, who has the confidence to spend $80,000 on a startup that might not exist in a year? The bankruptcy of Hi-Fi was a wake-up call. It broke the illusion of invincibility. If you want to see the reality of this boom, you don't go to the auto shows in Beijing or Shanghai. You go to the outskirts of Hangzhou. You go to the forgotten lots in the suburbs. Drone footage surfacing this year has revealed something dystopian. Thousands upon thousands of electric vehicles parked in tight rows, overgrown with weeds. Some of them still have the plastic wrap on the seats. They are registered, they have license plates, but they are abandoned. These are the EV graveyards. Here is how the scam worked. To get government subsidies, car companies had to show sales. To boost their stock price, they needed growth numbers. So they created fake fleet companies or car-sharing services. They sold the cars to themselves. The company records a sale, the government writes a check, the stock goes up. And the car? The car is driven into a field and left to rot. It happened with bicycles during the bike-sharing craze of 2017. Now it is happening with lithium-ion batteries and steel. These graveyards are ticking time bombs, literally. Thousands of degrading batteries sitting in the rain and heat. But economically, they represent billions of dollars of wasted capital. This is not a booming economy. This is an economy faking its vital signs. And the inventory is piling up at the dealerships too. This year, the Inventory Alert Index for Chinese auto dealers hit dangerous levels. Dealers are being forced to buy cars they can't sell. This is called channel stuffing. The manufacturer says, "We sold 100,000 units," but 40,000 of them are just sitting on dealer lots, gathering dust. The dealers are bleeding cash. In the first half of this year alone, over 1,500 car dealerships in China closed their doors forever. This is where the story stops being about stocks and starts being about people. For the last decade, the best and brightest in China, the software engineers, the battery chemists, the marketing wizards, flocked to the EV sector. This was the promised land. It paid better than internet tech. It was patriotic. You were building the future. Now that future is handing them a cardboard box and an escort to the door. In 2024, the layoffs began in earnest. But they don't call them layoffs. In China, the corporate euphemisms are even darker than in the West. They call it optimizing the structure. They call it graduating into society. Li Auto, one of the strongest competitors to Tesla, recently slashed its workforce. We are talking about thousands of jobs. Reports from insiders say that entire departments were gutted. The smart driving teams, the ones building the AI, were hit hard. Why cut the AI teams? Because AI is expensive and long-term. In a survival war, you cut the future to survive the present. Imagine you are a 30-year-old engineer. You bought an apartment in Shanghai at the peak of the market in 2021. You have a massive mortgage. Your parents put their life savings into your down payment. You work 996, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. You gave your life to this company. Then, on a Tuesday morning, your access card stops working. HR hands you a paper. No negotiation. You are out. Where do you go? Alibaba and Tencent are also firing. The real estate sector is dead. There are no jobs. There is a tragic joke circulating on Chinese social media right now. It says that the ultimate destination for the Chinese middle class is Didi, the Chinese Uber. You study for 16 years. You get a master's degree. You work as a senior engineer. And in the end, you wind up driving a BYD taxi, ferrying passengers around a city you can no longer afford to live in. This is the destruction of the Chinese middle class. These EV companies were supposed to be the engine of the new economy. Instead, they are creating a lost generation of highly educated, unemployed professionals. And into this burning building walks Lei Jun, the founder of Xiaomi. Xiaomi is famous for making phones and air fryers. But this year, they launched the SU7, their first electric car. The launch was spectacular. The marketing was Apple level. They claimed they received 50,000 orders in 27 minutes. But look closely at what happened next. Within days, videos started popping up of the SU7 crashing, suspension failures, software glitches, and then the complaints about refunds. Xiaomi entering the car market is not a sign of health. It is a sign of a bubble reaching its peak. When a phone company thinks, how hard can it be to build a car? You know the market is irrational. Building cars is hell. It requires logistics, safety testing, and service networks that take decades to build. Xiaomi is burning cash to gain market share in a market that has no profit. They are selling every car at a loss. Lei Jun admitted it. He said they are selling at a loss to make friends. But in business, you don't survive by making friends. You survive by making profit. Buffett knows this. He saw the same thing happen in the U.S. in the early 20th century. There used to be 2,000 car companies in America. Do you know how many survived to the year 2000? 3. Ford, GM, Chrysler. China has over 100 EV makers. 97 of them are walking dead. Xiaomi, despite its billions in cash, has jumped into a pool filled with sharks just as the water is being drained. There is another aspect to this collapse that people ignore: the technology trap. We are told that Chinese battery tech is years ahead. And yes, CATL and BYD make great batteries. But the leap to the holy grail, solid-state batteries, is proving much harder than the press releases suggest. Companies like NIO have been promising 1,000-kilometer range solid-state batteries for years. But when they finally released a version of it this year, it was incredibly expensive. It was a semi-solid state, a half step. Meanwhile, the current generation of lithium batteries is creating a massive environmental and financial liability. The resale value of used EVs in China is plummeting. Americans worry about depreciation? In China, a 3-year-old EV is treated like toxic waste. The technology moves so fast that a 2021 model is obsolete. And because of the price war, a new car is cheaper than a used one. This destroys the wealth effect. For most families, a car is an asset. In China, the EV has become a liability. If you bought a Tesla or a BYD 2 years ago, you have lost 50% of your value. That money has evaporated. It's gone. That is billions of dollars of consumer wealth wiped out, which means people stop spending. They stop going to restaurants. They stop buying clothes. The deflationary spiral begins. We cannot ignore the elephant in the room. The world is fighting back. For years, China subsidized its industry to undercut the West. It worked. They destroyed the solar panel industry in Europe. They dominated the steel industry. They thought they could do the same with cars. But the West learned its lesson. The European probe into Chinese subsidies is not just a bureaucratic procedure. It is a trade war declaration. France has already changed its subsidy rules to exclude Chinese cars. They require a carbon footprint certificate that conveniently disqualifies cars made with Chinese coal power. Turkey imposed a 40% tariff. Brazil is raising tariffs. India has shut the door. This is the nightmare scenario for Beijing. They built factories to supply the world, but the world is saying no. So what happens to those factories? They can't just be turned off. You have to pay the loans. You have to maintain the robots. You have to pay the local government taxes. This leads to zombie companies. The local governments in China cannot afford to let these car companies go bankrupt because it would cause social unrest. So they keep lending them money. They keep the lights on in empty factories. This is exactly what happened to the Soviet Union's heavy industry. It is exactly what happened to Japan in the 1990s. It creates an economy of the walking dead. Companies that produce nothing of value but suck up all the capital, preventing new, healthy companies from growing. There is a psychological shift happening in 2024 that is harder to measure but more important than any chart. It is the loss of faith. Investors are realizing that the numbers coming out of these companies are flexible. There was a scandal this year involving a major audit firm in China. Authorities are cracking down on accountants, telling them to destroy papers, telling them not to be too negative. When the government tells auditors to stop auditing, you know the books are cooked. Buffett doesn't play games with cooked books. He demands transparency. The lack of transparency in the Chinese market is becoming a wall that capital cannot climb. Foreign direct investment in China has turned negative. Money is flowing out, not in. And when the foreign money leaves, who is left to buy the stock? Only the Chinese retail investors, the chives as they are called in China, waiting to be harvested. The collapse of the EV sector is just a symptom of a larger disease, the end of the Chinese growth miracle. The real estate bubble popped. Now the manufacturing bubble is popping. Let's zoom in on a specific region, the Yangtze River Delta. This is the heart of the auto industry. Talk to the recruiters there. They will tell you that wages for factory workers have dropped by 30% this year. The hourly rate for a line worker in some EV plants is now lower than it was 5 years ago. They have cut the bonuses. They have cut the overtime. Workers are protesting. There have been sporadic strikes, footage of which is quickly scrubbed from the internet. But the anger is there. These workers were promised that if they moved from the countryside to the city, they would join the middle class. Now they are living in dormitories, working for peanuts, building cars that no one buys. And the robots? China is proud of its automation. But automation in a shrinking market is a curse. You spent billions on robots to replace workers, but now the robots are idle. The depreciation on those machines is killing your balance sheet. Conclusion: the oracle was right. So let's look at the picture Buffett sees. He sees a market saturated with 100 players where only 3 can survive. He sees a price war that is destroying profit margins across the board. He sees geopolitical doors slamming shut in the US and Europe. He sees a domestic consumer who is broke, fearful, and tired. He sees inventory rotting in fields. He sees the smartest engineers driving taxis. He sees the end of an era. The sale of BYD stock is not a trading decision. It is a historical verdict. It is Buffett saying, the miracle is over. The Chinese EV industry isn't going to disappear. BYD will survive. But the dream of infinite growth, of global domination, of easy riches, is dead. The next few years will be a brutal, bloody consolidation. The mass layoffs we are seeing now are just the first tremor of the earthquake, and when the dust settles, the landscape will look very different. The shiny, optimistic future of 2021 has been replaced by the gritty, survivalist reality of 2025. So, the next time you see a headline about a new Chinese supercar that flies or floats or cooks your dinner, ask yourself, is this a real product? Or is this the desperate last gasp of a company trying to keep its stock price above zero? Trust the man who sat quietly in Omaha and sold while everyone else was buying. He didn't become a billionaire by believing the hype. He became a billionaire by seeing the cliff before anyone else drove off it. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the U.S. tariffs are protecting American jobs, or are they just delaying the inevitable? And would you buy a Chinese EV for $10,000 if it meant giving up your data privacy? This is a conversation the mainstream media doesn't want to have. If you want to keep digging for the truth beneath the propaganda, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. The algorithm hates this kind of content, so your likes and comments are the only thing keeping us alive. Leave a comment below. Bubble if you think it's all crashing down, or boom if you think Buffett is wrong. I'll see you in the comments.